The rust-red dust of Aegis Prime never settled. It swirled in the recycled atmosphere of Command Outpost Gamma, a fine grit that coated every console, every uniform, and the back of every throat. The outpost, carved into the heart of a hollowed-out asteroid designated the Quarry, was less a military base and more a raw nerve ending for the Terran colonial authority. It was the farthest reach of human space, a place where signals came to die and hope was a rationed commodity. Major Kalen Vance liked it that way. Hope made you soft. He stood on the command deck of the Stalwart, the station's skeletal heart, watching the ghost-like images of the fleet drift across the main holotank. It wasn't much of a fleet, just a handful of repurposed asteroid miners and retrofitted freighters, their hulls scarred with plasma burns and patched with mismatched alloys. They were ugly, desperate things, much like humanity itself. Vance ran a hand over his jaw, the scruff of his beard rasping against his knuckles. 42 years had carved deep lines around his eyes, each one a testament to a battle lost or a compromise he couldn't forget. His gaze was fixed on the shimmering boundary marker that delineated TCA space from the vast, indifferent territory of the Galactic Concordance. A generation ago, humanity had tried to join that concordance. They'd arrived in the Galactic Theater full of wide-eyed ambition, eager to share, to learn, to belong. The concordance, a 1,000-year-old assembly of species that viewed time in geological spans, had greeted them with a condescending pat on the head and a series of crippling trade agreements. Then came the Scourge, a biological plague that swept through the outer colonies. The concordance offered thoughts and prayers while enforcing a strict quarantine, leaving dozens of human worlds to choke and die. They called it the Era of Isolation. Humans called it the Betrayal. Ever since, humanity had been the galaxy's problem child, aggressive, insular, and pathologically untrusting. They didn't build embassies anymore. They built gun platforms like the Quarry. Signal coming through. Major. A voice cut through his thoughts. Lieutenant Eva Rostova, his executive officer, stood at the communications console, her expression tight. She was young, sharp, a product of the post-betrayal military academies where cynicism was part of the core curriculum. Yet, somehow, she'd held on to a sliver of faith in diplomacy, a dangerous liability out here. It's a distress call, subspace, low gain, heavily degraded. Vance moved toward her, the magnetic soles of his boots clanking softly on the deck plating. From where he asked, his voice a low gravel, Rostova's fingers danced across her console, filtering the signal through 3 layers of decryption. Designation is Elysian 7. It's a jointly settled world in the neutral zone. Human colonists and Lumina. Vance felt a familiar knot tighten in his gut. The Lumina were a species of gentle, crystalline beings who communicated through light patterns. They were pacifists, respected members of the Concordance, and one of the few races who had ever shown humanity anything resembling kindness. Placing a human colony alongside them had been a pre-betrayal attempt at fostering goodwill. Now, it was just a liability. Put it on screen, he ordered. The main holotank flickered, the ghost fleet dissolving into a storm of static. A voice crackled through, warped by solar interference and something else. Panic. Attacking. Cathair ships in orbit. Ground assault. They're burning the fields. God. They're not stopping. This is Administrator Jian Li of Elysian 7. We are under attack. Requesting immediate TCA. Static. They're killing everyone. The signal died. replaced by the hiss of empty space. The command deck was silent. The only sound the hum of the life support systems, the Cathar. Of course, it was the Cathar. They were a rigid, avianoid species, the self-appointed enforcers of the Concordance. They viewed humanity as a feral species that needed to be caged, and they policed the treaties with a zealot's fervor. An attack on a neutral world was unthinkable unless it was sanctioned. "It's a fabrication," Rostova said immediately, turning away from the console. Her dark eyes were firm. "Major, the signal encryption is human, but the carrier wave modulation is classic Cathar. It's designed to look like a human signal in distress. They're trying to bait us." She was right. The technical details were suspicious. Responding to the call would mean sending ships into the neutral zone, a direct violation of the Treaty of Antares, which the Cathar would use as a pretext to retaliate with overwhelming force. It was a perfect trap. "They want us to cross the line," Rostova continued, her voice gaining strength. "They'll call it an act of unprovoked aggression. The Concordance will have no choice but to sanction a full-scale punitive action. This is how they finish what the Scourge started." Every officer on the deck was looking at Vance, their faces grim masks. Rostova's logic was sound, impeccable. It was the smart play, the safe play. It was the kind of play that had left the colony on Seraphim Ford to be glassed by pirates, while the Concordance fleet monitored the situation from a safe distance. Vance had been a junior officer on a ship that had been ordered to stand down and watch it happen. He still saw the flashes of cities dying in his sleep. "Maybe," Vance said, his voice dangerously quiet. He walked to the holotank, staring at the coordinates of Elysian 7 as if he could will the truth to appear. "Or maybe they're counting on us to think it's a trap. They know we're cautious. They know we've been beaten into submission. So they attack a soft target, a symbol of our past idealism, and they slaughter human civilians knowing full well we'll stand by and do nothing for fear of breaking their precious treaty." He turned to face his crew. "They're not just testing our fleet. They're testing our spirit. They want to see if there's any fight left in us at all." "Sir, with respect," Rostova countered, stepping forward. "Our spirit won't stop a Cathar battlecruiser. Our fleet is a joke. We have one heavy cruiser, the Indomitable, and it's 100 years old. Our other ships are little more than gunships. We can't win a direct engagement. We can't afford a war. We're already in a war." "Lieutenant," Vance snapped, his voice echoing in the sudden tension, "we've just been pretending we're not. They embargo our trade. They sabotage our terraforming projects. They arm the pirates that raid our shipping lanes. And now they're burning our colonists alive. What part of that sounds like peace to you?" He saw the doubt in their eyes, the fear. They were soldiers, but they were also survivors. They knew the numbers. Humanity was outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Their only advantage was their reputation for being unpredictable, for being willing to do the things a civilized race wouldn't. They were a cornered animal, and cornered animals were dangerous. "I'm not taking the fleet," Vance said, his decision solidifying like cooled steel. "I'm taking the stray dog. We'll run a fast recon. A single corvette won't be seen as an invasion force. We'll jump in, assess the situation, and if there are survivors, we'll get them out." Rostova's face paled. "The stray dog. Sir, that ship is a death trap. It's nothing but an engine with guns strapped to it. Its shields can't take a hit from a Cathar destroyer, let alone a cruiser. It's also the fastest ship we have, Vance replied coolly. They won't be able to lock onto us before we're gone. I'll hand-pick the crew myself. Volunteers only. He looked directly at Rostova. You have the con here. Keep the fleet on high alert, but do not, under any circumstances, cross that line unless you get a direct command from me. Are my orders clear? She held his gaze for a long moment, a silent battle of wills passing between them. He could see the arguments dying on her lips, the protest giving way to the rigid discipline that had been drilled into her. Yes, Major, she said, her voice clipped and professional. Your orders are clear. Vance gave a curt nod and turned to leave the command deck. He didn't want volunteers who were brave. He wanted volunteers who were angry. He wanted the ones who, like him, still had nightmares about Seraphim fruit. He found them in the mess hall, in the engine rooms, and on the firing ranges, the quiet, hard-eyed veterans who never spoke of the past but carried it in the slump of their shoulders. He didn't need to give a speech. He just told them the destination and showed them the fragmented distress call. Within an hour, the crew of the stray dog was assembled. The corvette itself was a testament to human ingenuity and desperation. It was a former high-speed courier, its cargo holds ripped out and replaced with an oversized reactor, a spinal-mounted magnetic accelerator cannon, and missile pods that were probably in violation of a dozen concordance treaties. It was cramped, loud, and smelled faintly of ozone and burned wiring. It was perfect. As Vance strapped himself into the command chair, he could feel the familiar thrum of the engine through the deck. It was a vibration that felt like a coiled spring, an anxious energy that matched his own. All hands. Report status, he said into the ship-wide comm. The reports came in. Calm and steady. Helm, navigation, weapons, engineering. They were all ready. These were men and women who had accepted they might not be coming back. Jump sequence initiated and the navigator announced. Destination Elysian 7. Jumping in 5, 4, 3. Vance closed his eyes for a second, the image of dying cities flashing behind his lids. 2, 1. The ship lurched as the void drive tore a hole in space-time. The universe outside the viewport twisted into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors, and then, just as suddenly, snapped back into the stark reality of black space and cold starlight. They had arrived, and they had arrived in hell. The space around Elysian 7 was a graveyard. The shattered remains of orbital stations and civilian transports drifted in a slow, silent ballet of destruction. The planet itself was shrouded in smoke, vast swathes of its green continents blackened and burning. The distress beacon was still chirping, a lonely cry from a mangled comm satellite that was tumbling end over end. And right in the middle of it all, hanging in space like a sharpened shard of obsidian, was a Cathar Devastator-class cruiser. It was flanked by two smaller destroyer escorts, their forms angular and predatory. They weren't attacking. They were holding position, forming a blockade, a quarantine. They're hailing us, the comms officer reported, his voice tight. Standard concordance channel. No encryption. On screen, Vance ordered. A holographic image of a Cathar captain appeared above the console. The alien's bird-like head was tilted, its dark, intelligent eyes blinking slowly. It wore the severe, high-collared uniform of a fleet commander. A translator converted its series of sharp clicks and whistles into sterile, synthesized English. Terran vessel stray dog, the voice droned. You are in violation of Concordance Mandate 74C. This system is under a Class 1 quarantine. Your presence is unauthorized. You will withdraw immediately, or you will be neutralized." Vance leaned forward, his knuckles white on the arms of his chair. "This is Major Kalen Vance of the TCA vessel Stray Dog. We received a distress call from the human colony on the surface. We are here to render aid." The Cathar captain's head tilted slightly, an expression that might have been amusement. "There is no colony to aid. The settlement suffered a catastrophic environmental failure. The situation is contained. Your assistance is not required." A lie. So blatant, so arrogant. Vance gestured to his sensor operator. "Scan the surface. Low energy. Passive sweeps. I want heat signatures. Life signs. Anything." The seconds dragged on. The Cathar cruiser sat there, impassive, a monolith of galactic law. On the main screen, the tactical display began to populate with tiny, flickering icons. "Sir, I'm getting readings from the surface," the sensor operator said, his voice barely a whisper. "Scattered pockets of life signs, human biosignatures. They're in the ruins of the main settlement, hiding." "But, sir, the Cathar are conducting a surface sweep. I'm seeing weapon discharges. They're not securing the area." His voice cracked. "They're hunting them." Vance stared at the display. He could see it all laid out in cold. Hard data. The small green dots of the human survivors, and the larger, red icons of Cathar ground troops moving methodically from ruin to ruin. Every few seconds, one of the green dots would extinguish. It wasn't a quarantine. It was an extermination. The comlink from the quarry crackled to life. Rostova's frantic voice cutting through. "Major, we're seeing their fleet disposition. That cruiser is the Vigilance. It's the flagship of their sector patrol. This is a sanctioned purge. Kalen, you can't fight them. Get out of there." "That's an order." Vance looked at the burning world below. He saw the impassive alien on his view screen, representing an order that had left his people to die time and time again. He saw the little green dots blinking out, one by one. They thought he would run. They thought he would follow the rules that had been designed to ensure his extinction. He reached forward and severed the link to Rostova, plunging the bridge of the Stray Dog into a sudden, profound silence. Every eye was on him. He could feel the weight of their gaze, the weight of a decision that would undoubtedly ignite a war his species could not hope to win. But survival wasn't about winning. It was about refusing to lose. He turned to his weapons officer, a grim-faced man named Corbin who had lost his family on Seraphim Veru. Vance didn't have to say a word. He just saw the same fire in Corbin's eyes that burned in his own gut. "They're not expecting a fight," Vance said, his voice a low, cold whisper that cut through the silence. "They think we're still broken. They think we still fear them." He leaned forward, his gaze locked on the Cathar cruiser. "Target the Vigilance. Slave the missile pods and the main cannon to my command. On my mark, fire everything we have." The silence on the bridge of the Stray Dog was the heavy, breathless kind that precedes a lightning strike. It was the collective intake of breath before the plunge, a shared moment of irrevocable choice. Vance's voice, when he gave the final command, was unnervingly calm. "Mark." Corbin's hands flew across his console, his knuckles brushing against a small, faded hollow pendant taped to the panel. A woman and a child smiled out from the flickering image. "Firing solution locked. Cannon is hot. Missiles are away." Outside the viewport, a series of bright, Sharp flashes erupted from the Corvette's weapon pods as a swarm of plasma-tipped missiles shot forward, their engines burning with furious white light. They were dumbfire munitions, cheap and plentiful, designed to overwhelm point defense systems through sheer numbers. But they were just the prelude. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the ship's hull, a sound that felt like it was coming from the bones of the universe. The spinal-mounted magnetic accelerator cannon, the Corvette's oversized, power-hungry heart, was charging. A pale blue light began to glow from the ship's prow, intensifying with every passing microsecond. "Cannon at 100%, Corbin announced, his voice strained with the effort of holding the targeting lock steady. "On your command, Major." On the main screen, the Cathar cruiser, the Vigilance, began to react. Its point defense lasers, thin crimson needles, lanced out, slicing through the missile swarm. Explosions blossomed in the void, silent and beautiful. But for every missile destroyed, 3 more slipped through the net. Vance didn't wait for the impacts. He watched the energy spike from the Cathar's main reactor as they diverted power to their shields. That was the moment he was waiting for. "Fire," he commanded. The stray dog shuddered as if struck by a giant's fist. The Mac cannon unleashed its payload, a single, solid slug of hyperdense tungsten, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light. It was an invisible projectile, a kinetic ghost that crossed the distance between the two ships in the blink of an eye. The missile impacts were a light show. Bright flashes of energy flared across the Vigilance's shields, causing them to shimmer and warp. The Cathar vessel barely seemed to notice. Then the tungsten slug arrived. It didn't explode. It simply hit. The cruiser's forward shield, already flickering from the missile barrage, collapsed in a cascade of emerald light. The slug tore through the unarmored bow of the ship, punching a clean, dark hole through multiple decks before its kinetic energy finally dissipated in a catastrophic eruption deep within the vessel's superstructure. A secondary explosion ripped through the midsection of the Vigilance, venting atmosphere and debris into space. Alarms blared across the Cathar's open channel, a screech of alien panic that was music to Corbin's ears. "Direct hit, confirmed shield failure and primary hull breach," he yelled, a savage grin spreading across his face. "They're bleeding, sir. They're bleeding." The victory was short-lived. The 2 destroyer escorts, ignored in the initial assault, peeled away from their wounded flagship and opened fire. The stray dog rocked violently as plasma bolts slammed into its navigational shields. The lights flickered, and the smell of burning electronics filled the bridge. "Shields at 40%, the tactical officer shouted. "They're trying to bracket us jacks. Get us out of their firing arc," Vance barked at his pilot. "Take us down. Use the planet's gravity well as cover jacks." A lanky kid with reflexes like a cornered mongoose didn't need to be told twice. He threw the Corvette into a punishing dive, pushing the inertial dampeners to their screaming limit. The crew was slammed back into their seats as the ship plummeted toward the smoke-choked atmosphere of Elysian 7. Plasma fire sizzled past the viewport, close enough to see the incandescent bolts of energy. "We're not going to make it into Atmo before they get a lock," Jax yelled over the roar of the engines. "They're anticipating our trajectory. Then give them a new one," Vance said through gritted teeth. "Corbin, eject the aft coolant tanks. Full detonation sequence." "Sir, that'll vent our entire reserve. We won't have enough for a combat-rated jump out of the system. We're not jumping anywhere if we're a cloud of vaporized metal. Do it." Corbin slammed his fist down on a console, and the ship shuddered again as two large cylindrical tanks were jettisoned from its stern. A moment later, they erupted in a blinding flash of light and energy, a miniature sun that momentarily overloaded the Cathar's targeting sensors. It was the opening Jax needed. He rolled the ship hard to port, sending it into a wild, uncontrolled-looking spiral as it breached the upper atmosphere. The hull groaned in protest, glowing a dull cherry red as friction turned the air outside into a superheated plasma sheath. The ride was rough, a bone-jarring descent through clouds of ash and chemical smog. They crash-landed in what had once been a vast, cultivated valley, now a cratered wasteland of blackened earth and twisted, skeletal trees. The impact threw Vance against his restraints, and the world went dark for a moment. When his vision cleared, the only sounds were the ticking of cooling metal and the panicked hiss of a ruptured plasma conduit somewhere below deck. "Damage report," he croaked, unbuckling himself and stumbling to his feet. Reports trickled in. The port engine was offline. The void drive was fractured. The main cannon was a twisted wreck. They were alive, but they were stranded. "Major, just you need to see this," Jax said from the pilot station, his voice hushed with awe and horror. Vance moved to the main viewport, which was miraculously intact. The sky above was a bruised purple, thick with smoke from 100 burning fires. The landscape was a monochromatic nightmare of gray ash and black rubble. They had landed near the edge of the settlement, and in the distance, he could see the skeletal remains of habitation domes and shattered agricultural towers. But that wasn't what had captured Jax's attention. Scattered across the valley were crystalline structures, some as tall as trees, others small and intricate like frozen flowers. They were all shattered, the Lumina. This had been their grove, a place where they communed with the planet and each other. Now, it was a field of broken glass. The Cathar hadn't just killed them, they had obliterated them, smashing their delicate forms into millions of glittering shards that caught the dim light like fallen stars. It was a desecration. "They didn't have to do that," Corbin whispered from behind him, all the victory gone from his voice, replaced by a hollow sickness. They were non-combatants. "That's why they did it," Vance said grimly. "To send a message. This is what happens to those who stand with humanity." He activated his helmet's external comm. "I'm taking a fire team out. We need to find those survivors. Jax, you're in command here. Get the engineering crew working on the starboard engine. If we can get that online, we can at least achieve low orbit. Corbin, you're on watch. Anything moves out there, you let me know. Vance, Corbin, and 2 other soldiers, a heavy weapons specialist named Marcus and a young medic named Thorn, exited through the ship's ventral hatch, their boots sinking into the soft gray ash. The air tasted of chemicals and death. They moved in a tight diamond formation toward the ruins, their pulse rifles sweeping the eerie landscape. The silence was unnerving. They passed the remains of a playground, a single metal swing creaking back and forth in the wind. A child's doll, its face half melted, lay in the ash. It was a scene of quiet, domestic horror. They found the first survivors huddled in the service tunnels beneath the main administrative dome. They were a mix of ages, their faces smudged with dirt and streaked with tears. Their eyes were wide with terror. But when they saw the TCA insignia on Vance's armor, a wave of desperate relief washed over them. A woman with short, Gray-streaked hair and a haunted look in her eyes, stepped forward. She wore the tattered remains of an administrator's uniform. "You came," she said, her voice hoarse. "I am Jian Li. I sent the call." "Major Kalen Vance," he replied, lowering his rifle slightly. "How many are you?" "Less than 200. We were over 5,000. And the Lumina. All of them. Gone." Her voice broke. "The Cathar landed an hour after their cruiser arrived. They said we were in violation of a resource treaty we'd never even heard of. They didn't offer us a chance to surrender. They just started killing. Their ground troops are still active," Vance said. "We saw them from orbit. They're hunting." Just then, a series of muffled thuds echoed from the surface above, followed by the distant chatter of Cathar plasma rifles. "They found another group," Jian Li whispered, her face ashen. "They're flushing everyone out of the smaller shelters, driving them into the open." Vance's mind raced. The stray dog was a sitting duck. His team was small. The survivors were civilians, not soldiers. But leaving them here was a death sentence. "We need to consolidate our position," he said, making a decision. "My ship is 2 kilometers east of her. It's damaged but defensible. We move everyone there, now." The journey back to the Corvette was a nightmare. They moved through the ruins in small, terrified groups, the soldiers forming a protective screen. They had to carry the wounded, quiet the crying children. Twice, they had to dive for cover as Cathar patrols swept overhead in low-flying skimmers, their searchlights cutting through the gloom. They made it back just as the planet's small, dim sun was setting, painting the smoky sky in shades of blood and rust. They herded the civilians into the ship's empty cargo bay, the space a cramped, miserable sanctuary. Thorn, the medic, immediately set up a triage center, his face a grim mask as he tended to burn wounds and plasma injuries. Vance stood with Jian Li on the ship's entry ramp, looking out at the darkening wasteland. From their vantage point, they could see Cathar ground forces converging on the settlement, a methodical, tightening noose of searchlights and armored patrols. "They know we're here," Jian Li said, stating the obvious. "They'll be on us by morning." "The starboard engine is still offline," Vance said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Even if we get it running, we can't outrun that cruiser in atmosphere. And we don't have the power to break orbit and jump." "So we're trapped," she said, her voice devoid of hope. "We're just delaying the inevitable." Vance didn't reply immediately. He was watching the Cathar. They were thorough, efficient. They were operating by the book. They were assuming their enemy was a conventional one. They assumed the humans would either try to hide or try to run. He thought of Seraphim, of the orders to stand down, to play by the rules. He thought of the burning cities he had been forced to watch from a safe, sanctioned distance. The rules had been written by the people who were now hunting his own. To hell with the rules. A slow, dangerous idea began to form in his mind. It was insane. It was suicidal. It was exactly the kind of move they would never anticipate. He turned to Jian Li, a new light in his eyes, the cold, hard glint of a predator. "They've taken our sky," he said, his voice a low growl. "They think they control the ground." He pointed toward a massive, half-ruined structure on a distant mesa, its silhouette just visible against the dying light. It was one of the planet's original terraforming atmospheric processors, but they don't control the planet itself. Jian Li followed his gaze, her brow furrowed in confusion. What are you planning? Major, the Cathar are an avian species, Vance said, thinking aloud. Their biology is adapted to a thin, nitrogen-rich atmosphere. The terraforming on Elysian 7 was designed to create a denser, oxygen-heavy environment for humans and the silica-based Lumina. He looked at her, the plan clicking into place. We're not going to try to outrun them. We're going to make it so they can't breathe. The interior of the atmospheric processor was a cavernous, cathedral-like space filled with the ghosts of forgotten industry. Massive condenser coils, coated in a thick layer of red dust, snaked their way up the walls like petrified serpents. The air was cold and still, disturbed only by the rhythmic drip of condensation echoing in the darkness. Vance and his small team, Corbin, Marcus, and Jian Li, who insisted on coming as she was the only one who understood the processor's pre-war schematics, moved cautiously through the main control chamber. Their helmet lamps cut sharp cones of light through the gloom, revealing consoles shrouded in cobwebs and floors littered with the debris of a generation of neglect. The main reactor is offline, as expected, Jian Li said, her voice a hushed echo over the comms. She ran a gloved hand over a dusty control panel, her touch almost reverent, but the geothermal taps should still be active. The planet's core provides a constant source of power. If we can reroute that auxiliary power to the primary atmospheric pumps and override the safeties, we can flood the valley with a pure, unbreathable oxygen-argon mix. Vance finished for her, the grim logic of their plan hanging in the air. Highly corrosive, lethal to Cathar physiology within minutes. For us, it'll be like breathing soup, but the suit scrubbers can handle it for a few hours. It's more than just lethal, Major, Jian Li corrected, her voice tight with the moral weight of their actions. It will be agonizing. Their respiratory systems will crystallize. We're not just killing them. We're dissolving them from the inside out. Marcus, a man whose quiet demeanor belied the heavy repeater cannon he carried, shifted uncomfortably. Are we sure about this? Sir, there's no coming back from this. The Concordance sees this as a biological weapon. The Concordance can call it whatever they want. Corbin cut in, his voice raw. He was staring at a large, shattered window that overlooked the valley. In the distance, the faint lights of the Cathar patrols moved like malevolent fireflies. They were calling it a quarantine while they executed children. I'm fresh out of concern for their comfort. Vance held up a hand, silencing them. We're not here to debate the ethics of survival. People, we're here to survive. Jian, how long will it take to bring the system online? She pointed to a massive circular conduit in the center of the room, the primary power relay. It's been manually disconnected. Someone needs to get down there and physically reconnect the circuit breakers. It's a 3-person job, at least. 2 to hold the breakers in place, while a 3rd throws the main switch up here. The magnetic field will be immense. Corbin, Marcus, you're with me, Vance ordered. Jian, you stay here. Talk us through it. Once those breakers are set, you power up the pumps on my mark. Maximum output. No safeties. No gradual release. We hit them with everything at once. Leaving Jian Li in the control room, the 3 soldiers descended a rickety maintenance ladder into the processor's sublevel, a dark, labyrinthine space that hummed with a low, latent energy. The air was thick with the smell of ozone. They found the relay housing, a massive metal cage surrounding a series of copper-colored levers. each the size of a man's arm. "This is it," Vance said, his lamp beam playing over the tarnished metal. "Corbin, you take the left. Marcus, the right. On Gian's signal, you force those breakers down and hold them. Don't let go. No matter what, I'll throw the master switch from the auxiliary panel over there. Ready in the control room. Major." Gian Lee's voice crackled in their ears. "Auxiliary power is stable. Waiting for you." "You heard her," Vance said, moving to the smaller panel. "On 3. 1, 2. 3. Corbin and Marcus threw their full weight against the heavy levers. The metal groaned in protest, resisting with decades of inertia. With a final synchronized grunt, the breakers slammed down into their contacts. Immediately, a powerful blue arc of electricity erupted between the contacts, and the entire structure began to vibrate with a deep, resonant hum. The magnetic field was a physical force, tugging at their weapons, making the fillings in their teeth ache. "Hold it!" Vance yelled over the noise, his own body straining against the invisible force as he reached for the master switch. It was a large, heavy knife switch, protected by a rusted cover. He wrestled the cover off and gripped the handle. "Jane, now pumps are spinning up," she reported, diverting all power. "Atmospheric regulators are offline. I'm reading a massive pressure spike in the main vents." Vance pulled the switch. The world dissolved into a cacophony of screeching metal and blinding white light. The magnetic field intensified tenfold, and, for a terrifying second, Vance felt like his blood was boiling. He was thrown back from the panel, his vision swimming. Through the ringing in his ears, he could hear the screams of Corbin and Marcus as they fought to hold the breakers in place. High above, in the control room, Jian Li watched in horrified awe as the pressure gauges on her console shot into the red and then went off the scale. The entire facility was shaking, the deep groans of stressed metal echoing through the mountain. On her monitor, a schematic of the valley floor showed a massive, invisible cloud of gas erupting from the processor's dispersion vents, rolling down the mesas and into the valley below like a silent, deadly fog. Down in the valley, the Cathar patrols were the first to notice the change. Their skimmer's atmospheric sensors began to shriek alarms. The soldiers on the ground paused, tilting their avian heads as the air grew thick and heavy, shimmering with a strange, oily quality. Then the coughing started. It began as a dry, rasping hack, then quickly escalated into a desperate, wet struggle for breath. The high oxygen, high argon mix was like acid in their lungs. They clawed at their helmets, their movements growing frantic, uncoordinated. Their comrades watched in confusion, then horror, as the first soldiers collapsed, their bodies convulsing, a dark, crystalline fluid foaming from their mouths. Panic erupted. The methodical, disciplined hunters became a terrified, dying mob. Aboard the stray dog, the survivors watched through the main viewport as the Cathar searchlights flickered and died. One by one, the distant sounds of weapon fire ceased, replaced by a chilling silence. Thorne, the medic, stood beside Jax, his face pale. "My God," he whispered. What did he do? Back at the processor, Vance staggered to his feet, his vision slowly returning. Corbin and Marcus had been thrown clear of the relay, their bodies bruised but intact. The deafening noise had subsided to a low, steady hum. "It's done," Vance rasped into his comm. "Gian's status. The valley floor is saturated," she replied, her voice shaky. "Life sign monitor show. Nothing. All Cathar biosignatures are gone. Major. It worked." The journey back was surreal. They walked through a landscape of the dead. Cathar soldiers lay where they had fallen, their bodies contorted. Their advanced armor no protection against an enemy they couldn't see or shoot. The invisible cloud of gas had done its work with terrifying efficiency. It was a silent, sterile victory. There was no elation on the faces of Vance or his men, only a grim, hollowed-out exhaustion. They returned to the stray dog to a scene of hushed relief and fearful respect. The survivors looked at Vance not as a savior, but as something more primal, more terrifying. He was the man who had turned the very air into a weapon. "Engineering reports the starboard engine is back online," Jax reported as Vance stepped onto the bridge. "It's not pretty, but it'll get us off this rock." "And the vigilance?" Vance asked, his eyes scanning the tactical display. "Still up there," Jax said, pointing to the red icon hanging in low orbit. "She's not moving." "Scans show she's venting plasma from her main drive. Our slug did more damage than we thought, but her weapons are still active. We try to break orbit, she'll swat us like a fly." Vance stared at the icon, his mind working. The Cathar on the ground were dead. The cruiser was crippled, but they were still trapped under the gun of a superior vessel. His gamble had saved the colonists, but it hadn't saved his ship. He had won the battle, but he was about to lose the war. "There's one other thing." "Major," Jax said, his voice hesitant. "While you were gone, we picked up a signal, buried deep in the subspace chatter. It's not concordance. It's not TCA." He brought the signal up on the main screen. It was an audio file, heavily encrypted, but the ship's AI had managed to break the first layer. It was a voice, speaking a dialect of Old Terran, a language not used in centuries. The words were distorted, but the meaning was clear. "Phoenix Protocol activated. The children of Sol are scattered no more. The unseen fleet awakens. To any who bear the old blood, a new dawn is coming. Seek the ghost of Orion." The message repeated on a loop. Vance stared at the screen, a cold knot forming in his stomach. The Phoenix Protocol was a myth, a conspiracy theory whispered in the dark corners of colonial bars. It was the legend of a secret fleet, built in the dark years after the betrayal, a fleet of ghost ships and sleeper cells waiting for the day when humanity would need to fight a war not for survival, but for retribution. The unseen fleet. He had dismissed it as the fantasy of desperate people, but this signal, it was real. Before he could process this new, staggering revelation, the proximity alert shrieked through the bridge. "New contact," Jax yelled, jumping into the system right on top of us, on the screen. A new icon appeared, massive and blue. A spatial distortion tore open the fabric of space not 5,000 kilometers from their position, and something vast and dark emerged. It was a ship, but it was unlike anything Vance had ever seen. It was a brutalist wedge of black alloy, devoid of running lights or insignia, its surface covered in strange, angular protrusions that hummed with a visible energy. It was easily twice the size of the Cathar cruiser. "Identify," Vance snapped. "No transponder." "Sir," the sensor officer stammered. "No registry, it's a ghost ship." The unknown vessel ignored them completely. A series of hatches opened along its dorsal spine, and a weapon system of terrifying scale powered up. A beam of pure, white-hot energy, thicker than the stray dog itself, lanced out and struck the crippled Cathar cruiser. The Vigilance, a ship that had terrorized this sector for decades, a symbol of Concordance power, didn't even have time to raise its remaining shields. It simply vanished, consumed in a silent, all-encompassing flash of light. The space where it had been was empty, save for a few shimmering motes of vaporized metal. The bridge of the stray dog was utterly silent. They had just witnessed a level of firepower they didn't know existed. The ghost ship sat there for a long moment, a silent, black predator in the void. Then, its main communications channel opened, broadcasting on an open, unencrypted frequency. A message meant for them. It was the same voice from the recording, but this time, it was clear and strong. Vessel Stray Dog, we are the Vindicator. The Phoenix has risen. Your war is over. Ours has just begun. The voice of the Vindicator hung in the void, a pronouncement that was equal parts salvation and death sentence. On the bridge of the Stray Dog, Vance and his crew could only stare at the impossible ship that had just erased a Concordance battlecruiser as casually as one might swat a fly. The black, angular vessel was a void in space, absorbing the light of the distant stars, a manifestation of a power humanity wasn't supposed to possess. "They're hailing us," the comms officer whispered, his voice trembling. "Direct, encrypted channel. They're using our command codes. Our current command codes." The implication was chilling. This wasn't some long-lost fleet stumbling out of history. They had active intelligence. They knew who Vance was. They had been watching. "On screen," Vance said, his own voice sounding distant to his ears. The face that appeared on the main holotank was not what he expected. It was a woman, perhaps in her late 50s, with sharp and intelligent eyes the color of storm clouds and silver hair pulled back in a severe military bun. She wore a simple, high-collared black uniform, devoid of rank or insignia, but the authority in her gaze was absolute. It was the look of someone who had not had to ask for anything in a very long time. "Major Kalen Vance," she said, her voice the same one from the broadcast, calm and measured. "I am Admiral Serafina Rask. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but we had a schedule to keep." Vance found his voice, the shock giving way to a surge of adrenaline. "Admiral of what fleet? The TCA has no record of you, or your ship." A faint, mirthless smile touched Rask's lips. "The Terran Colonial Authority is a government of compromise. Major, a body that negotiates for scraps from the Concordance's table. We are not part of that system. We are the system that comes after. We are the unseen fleet." The name, spoken aloud by its commander, sent a fresh wave of disbelief through the bridge. The myth was real. The ghost story told to frighten alien children was floating right outside their viewport. "You've made a bold move, Major," Rask continued, her eyes boring into him, turning Elysian 7's atmosphere into a weapon. "Crude, but effective. You showed initiative. You showed a willingness to abandon the rules that were written to keep us in a cage. That is a quality we value. We did what we had to do to survive," Vance said, his jaw tightening. "Survival is no longer the goal. Major, dominance is," she replied, her voice dropping, taking on a harder edge. "For 50 years, the Phoenix Protocol has been gestating in the dark. We've been building ships like the Vindicator in rogue asteroid fields and hollowed-out moons. We've been placing agents inside Concordance governments and TCA command structures. We have watched our people be marginalized. quarantined, and exterminated, all while our leaders beg for understanding from species that view us as little more than intelligent pests. The time for begging is over. The time for retribution has come. A cold dread began to seep into Vance's bones, colder than the vacuum of space outside. He had ignited a spark of defiance. Rask was here to pour gasoline on it and burn the galaxy down. The distress call from Elysian 7, Vance said, a sickening realization dawning on him. It wasn't a Cathar trap. Was it Rostova was wrong? Oh, the attack was very real. Rask confirmed. The Cathar are nothing if not predictable in their arrogance. But the signal that reached you, we may have given it a little boost, amplified it just enough to ensure it reached the one TCA outpost commander we believed might actually do something about it. We needed a catalyst. Major. A righteous, public incident to justify what comes next. You have just given us that? The bridge was silent. Vance felt like a pawn in a game whose rules he was only just beginning to understand. He had thought he was making a choice, but his every move had been anticipated, even encouraged. His righteous anger, his desperate gamble, it had all been part of a much larger, more terrifying plan. What happens now, he asked, the words feeling heavy in his mouth. Now. You and your people are coming with us, Rask stated. It was not a request. The stray dog is crippled, but you have 200 civilian witnesses who will testify to the Cathar's atrocities. Your crew are heroes who defied a corrupt treaty to save them. You, Major, are about to become a very useful symbol, or she gestured to someone off-screen. We are extending a docking umbilical. Our medical teams will tend to your wounded. Your engineers can debrief with ours. You have 5 minutes to prepare your people for transfer. The screen went blank, leaving Vance to stare at his own reflection in the dark glass. He was trapped. To refuse would be suicide. To accept was to endorse a war that would make the slaughter on Elysian 7 look like a minor skirmish. He looked at his crew. He saw the shock and fear in their eyes. But he also saw something else, a dangerous glimmer of hope. For the first time since the betrayal, they had seen a human ship stand up to the Concordance and win. Rask's words, her promise of retribution, resonated with a deep, primal part of them that had been suppressed for decades. The transfer to the Vindicator was a disorienting experience. The interior of the ship was as stark and functional as its exterior. The corridors were wide, clad in the same non-reflective black alloy. There were no decorations, no unnecessary comforts. The crew members they passed were all disciplined, silent figures in identical black uniforms. Their faces hard and unreadable. They moved with a purpose that bordered on fanaticism. Vance was separated from his crew and the survivors and escorted to an observation deck high on the ship's command spire. Admiral Rask was waiting for him, standing before a panoramic viewport that looked out upon a breathtaking, terrifying sight. They were no longer in the Elysian system. They had jumped to a staging area, a nebula of churning purple and black gas. And within that nebula, a fleet was gathering. There were dozens of them. Ships like the Vindicator, brutal black wedges that bristled with unknown weapons. Sleek, dagger-like destroyers that moved with predatory grace. And in the center of the formation, a vessel so vast it beggared belief. A mobile command base that was less a ship and more an artificial moon. It was a fleet built in secret, a fleet that could challenge the combined might of the entire Concordance. Impressive, isn't it? Rask said without turning. This is only a fraction of our strength. We have fleets like this one hidden in every quadrant of the galaxy, waiting for the signal. "And what is the signal?" Vance asked, his voice hoarse. "You already gave it," she replied, finally turning to face him. "The massacre of Elysian 7 is already being broadcast on every TCA channel. We've made sure of it. Your XO, Lieutenant Rostova, is being hailed as a hero for trying to stop you from violating the treaty. EarthGov is condemning your rogue actions. The Concordance is mobilizing its fleet for a punitive expedition." Everyone is playing their part perfectly. She gestured to the viewport. "In 3 hours, this fleet will jump to the Antares system. We will engage the Cathar home fleet. We will break their orbital defenses, and we will do to their homeworld, Cathara, what they did to Elysian 7. We will burn them from their own sky. That will be our declaration of war, not a plea for recognition, a statement of fact. Humanity is no longer on the defensive." Vance felt a wave of nausea. This was madness. A direct assault on a Concordance founding world would unite the entire galaxy against them. "You can't win," he said. "Even with this fleet, you'll be fighting 1,000 different species on 1,000 fronts. You'll drain Earth's resources, sacrifice generations of our people. For what revenge, not revenge. Major." "A culling," Rask said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. "The galaxy is old, fat, and complacent. It's ruled by species who have forgotten how to fight, who hide behind treaties and protocols because they lack the will to bleed. We have that will. We remember what it is to be hungry, to be desperate. We will not fight them on 1,000 fronts. We will decapitate their leadership, shatter their fleets, and break their economic infrastructure. We will sow so much chaos and fear that the Concordance will collapse under its own weight. And from the ashes, a new order will rise. A human order." She stepped closer to him, her eyes searching his face. "I know what you're thinking. You think we are monsters. Perhaps we are. But the universe is dark, Major, and it does not reward the meek. It rewards the monsters who are willing to do what is necessary. I did not bring you here to ask for your allegiance. You will give it, or you will be erased. But I want you to understand the necessity of it. I want you to see that this is the only path left." She led him from the observation deck to a different part of the ship, a secure data vault deep within its armored core. Inside, holographic projectors filled the room with images and data streams. For the next hour, she showed him the truth that the unseen fleet had uncovered over 50 years of espionage. She showed him Concordance internal memos that detailed the plan to let the Scourge burn through the human colonies, calling it a natural culling of an aggressive, expansionist species. She showed him the secret trade agreements between the Cathar and the pirates who raided human shipping lanes. She showed him biological studies that debated whether humans possessed true sentience or were merely clever animals. She showed him the Concordance's final, long-term solution for the human problem, a slow systematic campaign of economic strangulation, biological containment, and cultural assimilation designed to render humanity extinct within 5 centuries. It was all there. Cold, calculating, and undeniable. The betrayal hadn't been a moment of panicked indifference. It had been policy. Vance stood in the center of the room, the damning evidence swirling around him, and felt the last of his old loyalties, his belief in law and order, crumble to dust. He had known the galaxy was cruel. He had not known it was genocidal. He had been fighting to save a species that the universe had already condemned to death. He looked at Rask, her face illuminated by the holographic glow of a Cathar battle plan. He saw no madness in her eyes, only a terrible, chilling clarity. She was not a monster born of hatred. She was a surgeon holding a bone saw, ready to amputate a gangrenous limb before the infection could kill the patient. Humanity was the patient. The concordance was the gangrene. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice a dead monotone. "Your crew respects you. The survivors of Elysian 7 see you as their savior," she said. "When we attack Cathara, I want you on the command deck of the Vindicator, by my side. I want your voice to be the one that addresses the fleet. I want you to tell them what you saw on that planet. I want you to turn their grief and their anger into a weapon. You will be the face of this war, Major, a symbol of righteous fury, the hero who fired the first shot in humanity's war for liberation. The choice was no choice at all. He could become a martyr, a footnote in a report about a rogue officer who was silenced, or he could become a weapon, a symbol for a cause that was both terrifying and, he was now forced to admit, utterly necessary. He thought of the shattered lumina, the melted doll in the ash, the quiet acceptance of death in Jian Li's eyes. He thought of Seraphimfer. He thought of the decades of humiliation, of being treated as less than people. He looked Admiral Rask in the eye. "Show me the battle plan," he said. "I want to know exactly how we're going to make them burn." The command deck of the Vindicator was a theater of calm, focused lethality. There were no raised voices, no panicked shouts, only the quiet, clipped reports of officers and the soft chime of targeting solutions locking into place. Kalen Vance stood beside Admiral Rask at the central holotank, a ghost in a black uniform that felt alien against his skin. Below them, the unseen fleet, a swarm of black daggers, held its position in the void, a patient predator waiting for the signal to strike. The Cathar homeworld, Cathara, a majestic swirl of ochre and crimson, hung before them, protected by a layered defense of orbital platforms and the full might of their sector fleet. It was a fortress, and they were about to kick in the door. "It is time." "Major," Rask said, her voice a quiet command that cut through the low hum of the bridge. "The fleet is listening." Vance stepped forward, his boots making no sound on the deck. A channel opened, and his image was broadcast to every ship in the fleet, from the smallest destroyer to the moon-sized command base. He looked out at the faces of his new comrades on the adjacent screens, hardened, zealous, hungry for a victory they had been denied for generations. He saw Corbin among them, the grief on his face having finally calcified into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. This was his army now. He had been given a script, a rousing speech of vengeance and destiny. He ignored it. He simply told them what he had seen. "I stood in the ash of Elysian 7, he began, his voice low and devoid of theatrics, which only made it more powerful. "I saw the playgrounds where our children played, covered in the dust of their burned homes. I saw the shattered crystals of the Lumina, a peaceful people who died for the crime of calling us friends. The Concordance calls this an act of quarantine, a necessity. They lied." He paused, letting the weight of the word hang in the silence. The Cathar ground troops were not containing a threat. They were hunting survivors. They were executing our people, one by one, in the dark. We have lived by their rules for 100 years. We have honored their treaties, respected their borders, and accepted their embargoes. And our reward was to be left to die. Over and over again. They call us an infection. They call us animals. He leaned closer to the pickup, his eyes burning with a cold fire. Today, we show them what happens when the animal finally bites back. Today, there are no rules. There are no treaties. There is only the debt, and it will be paid in fire. He stepped back. He had expected a roar of approval, a cheer. Instead, a profound and terrible silence fell over the fleet, a shared focus of immense, focused rage. It was far more terrifying. Rask gave a single, curt nod. All ships, execute battle plan Omega. On my mark. The battle began not with a charge, but with a ghost. A single, small stealth vessel, a ship Vance hadn't even seen in the formation, slipped past the Cathar's outer sensor net. It wasn't carrying weapons. It was carrying a virus, a logic bomb 50 years in the making, coded in an archaic machine language the Concordance had long since deemed obsolete. As the unseen fleet jumped into the system in a brutal, overwhelming display of force, the virus was uploaded into the Cathar's central battle network. The initial engagement was everything the Cathar expected. Their fleet. A proud assembly of sleek, powerful warships moved to intercept. Their orbital platforms, monuments to their military might, opened fire, spitting lances of energy into the black. The first wave of unseen destroyers met them head-on, and the void erupted in a silent, terrible storm of light and shredded metal. On the Vindicator's tactical display, blue and red icons flickered and died with sickening regularity. It was a maelstrom, a chaotic dance of death, where ships on both sides were ripped apart by overwhelming firepower. Vance watched, his stomach churning, as 3 destroyers in his new command group were vaporized in a single volley from an orbital platform. This was the cost of this war, a cost measured in thousands of lives per second. Then the virus activated. It didn't just shut down the Cathar systems. That would have been too simple, too merciful. It took control. Across the Cathar fleet, bridge crews watched in horror as their targeting systems turned on their own ships. A cruiser's main cannon swiveled and fired point-blank into its destroyer escort. 2 frigates, their engines firing uncontrollably, slammed into each other in a bloom of incandescent plasma. The orbital platforms, the pride of their defense, began targeting each other, their massive energy beams crisscrossing the battle space in a self-destructive web of friendly fire. On the main view screen of the Vindicator, they saw a transmission from a Cathar bridge, the captain screeching at his crew before his own ship's point defense lasers turned inward and sliced the bridge in half. It was a symphony of chaos, a masterfully executed stroke of technological fratricide. The unseen fleet simply had to hold its position and pick off the ships that managed to reboot their systems or break free from the digital puppetry. The Cathar's proud fleet wasn't defeated. It was forced to commit suicide. Within 30 minutes, the space around Cathara was a silent graveyard of their own making. The orbital platforms were shattered ruins. The home fleet was a drifting field of wreckage and corpses. The planet was defenseless. The orbital space is secure. Admiral, the tactical officer reported, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and fear. Their chain of command is broken. The planet is ours for the taking. This was the moment Vance had been dreading, the moment of victory. When the true face of the victor is revealed, he expected the order to begin orbital bombardment, to turn the ochre continents to glass, to answer one atrocity with another, magnified 1,000-fold. But Rask was more methodical than that. We are not here to make rubble, Commander, she said, her voice cool and precise. We are here to remove a threat. Permanently. She issued a new set of commands. There was no indiscriminate fire. Instead, the fleet began a series of surgical strikes. Kinetic rods, launched from orbit, struck with pinpoint accuracy. They didn't hit cities or civilian centers. They hit military academies. They hit the primary shipyards, shattering the dry docks where new warships were being built. They hit the planetary communication relays, plunging the world into an information blackout. They hit the Ministry of War, the Office of Concordance Enforcement, and every major command and control bunker on the planet. They were decapitating the Cathar war machine, not just for today, but for a century to come. It wasn't an act of rage. It was a cold, calculated lobotomy. A wideband channel was open to the planet's surface, and the testimonies of Jan Lee and the other survivors of Elysian 7 were broadcast on a loop, their grief-stricken faces appearing on every screen that still had power. It was a message to the Cathar people. Your leaders did this. Your pride brought this upon you. Your civilization is broken because you thought we were. As the last strike was completed, Vance stood by the viewport, watching the planet below. It was still beautiful, still alive, but it was also silenced, broken, and helpless. They had not destroyed a world. They had put it in a cage. It is done, Rask said, coming to stand beside him. She looked not at the planet, but at the reflection of the fleet in the viewport. The Concordance has just received news of our attack. Their fleets are in disarray. Their leadership is in denial. Species that have long bristled under Cathar authority are already beginning to question their allegiances. The great machine is breaking, and we are the gear that broke it. What now? Vance asked, the question feeling impossibly small in the face of what they had just done. Do we go home? Rask gave him that same mirthless smile. Home Major, we are the new authority now. The TCA will crumble and be absorbed. Earth will become the heart of a new empire, whether it wants to or not. There is no going back. We have 100 more targets on our list, 100 more species that need to be reminded of the price of their arrogance. This was not the last battle of a small war. It was the first battle of the great one. She turned to him, her eyes holding his. I am giving you permanent command of the 3rd Strike Group, with the Stray Dog as your new flagship. Once it is refitted with our technology, your name is already becoming a legend. Major, the Avenger of Elysian 7, the Breaker of Cathara. You are the hero this war needs. Vance looked away from her, back to the silent, conquered world below. He thought of the man he had been, the weary soldier guarding a forgotten border, clinging to a code of honor that the universe had discarded long ago. That man was dead. He had died in the dust of Aegis Prime, in the silent screams of the Lumina, in the cold, clear logic of Admiral Rask's data vault. The man standing here now was something else. A symbol, a weapon, a monster. He had fired the first shot to save 200 people. Now, he was being asked to fire the shots that would kill billions, to forge an empire from the ashes of a galaxy he himself had set on fire. And the most terrifying part was, he knew he would do it, because Rask was right. The universe did not reward the meek. He had tried to be a good soldier in a galaxy that punished goodness. Now, he would be a great one in a galaxy that rewarded strength. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. What is our next target? Admiral Rask's smile widened, and she turned to the main holotank, where the map of the galaxy was already being redrawn, not with the lines of treaties and borders, but with the stark, clean lines of fire and conquest. The war for survival was over. The war for humanity's soul had just been lost, and in its place, the war for dominance had begun.